success or failure of an organization, an institution, a community go right to the leadership. And the leadership has to set an incredible example. Whether you're taking care of customers, whether you're taking care of your employees, it's doing those things that you promise. And when you don't do those things that promise, a lot of things crumble in your culture, in your brand.
The Point podcast by Apex Benefits is where we dig deep and get to the point of how to be the best employer possible. From leading with purpose to building better benefits programs, our guests share lessons learned as they've worked to become more competitive as an organization and more sought after as a top employer. Now, let's get to the point.
This is Steve Winbun, Vice President of Sales with Apex Benefits, and I'm excited to be joined today by the Chief Executive Officer and owner of RJE Business Interiors, Denny Sponsel. Denny, thank you for joining us today.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here for sure.
So I want to explain to our audience the why behind Denny being here and what really brought our paths together. And I want to walk back to earlier this spring to an event that I had the privilege of attending that really only occurs because of Denny's generosity. And this is an executive dining experience that is put on by the Indiana State University Scott School of Business. And the purpose of this dinner is to bring high-performing students from the School of Business that have to be recommended by the faculty together for really real-world networking and dining experience with leaders throughout the state of Indiana. You gave the leaders from Indianapolis that attended a framed copy of this. It still sits on my desk today and will never leave because it's, what he wrote is true and really how we need to carry ourselves, not only in the professional world, but in our personal lives. And it was wonderful meeting all the students, hearing their story. But as we got together, Denny had the opportunity to address the group. And I know everybody was really moved about this, and it had a big, profound impact on them. And you really teed up three things that we're going to dive into within this session, Denny. And I know many of the listeners have probably seen some form of this, but is the 10 things that require no talent. The second was living a life that matters. Now, we're gonna get to that to the end because I know Denny's going to want to talk about this, but it was not only awesome, but it spurred a lot of additional talk. So enough of my talking, Denny. We want to get to you. And so you've got a great story, and I'd like to tell us about growing up in Indianapolis, your childhood, education, early career, and what really inspired you to come to RJE Interiors.
It's always fun to share a story, whether it's about yourself or about your business, because it is about who you are and what made you what you are. I had the opportunity to grow up on the inner city of Indianapolis. I'm one of 7 kids. I'm right in the middle. We had 5 boys, 2 girls, had a wonderful childhood, grew up. I went to school at a small all-boys Catholic school downtown Indianapolis. And then I was going to be a basketball star and went up to St. Joe's College in Rensselaer, Indiana. And I went up there, found out everybody was as good, if not better than me. That was a whole new world. And spent my freshman year at St. Joe, but then transferred to IUPUI down in Indianapolis to finish. And coming out of IUPUI, in those days, there were employment agencies. There weren't recruiters. And I had a few interviews at places. And I knew I wanted to be in business. And I thought sales and marketing had a great appeal for me. And so therefore, I had this interview with a manufacturer by the name of Knoll. And I went to work for Knoll as a sales rep in Indianapolis. And from that, had a lot of mentors, and I would say good mentors and poor mentors. And for many of you, I'm sure you know what that means. There are people that show you how to do some things, and there are people that show you how not to do some things. And through that career, I eventually managed the Midwest for Knoll. And then in March of 2000, had the opportunity to buy their distributorship in Indianapolis. And if you take yourself back, in May of 2000 was the dot-com bust. And then a few months later was 9/11, and I had just bought this business. Well, growing up in the Catholic schools, the nuns always taught us, look, buck up, make it happen. You signed on, you've got to live up to it. And we built the business from an $8 million business up to about a $60 million business. We're currently in 2 different markets. We were one time in 4 different markets. But RJE Business Interiors, what started to be a traditionally office furniture dealership, is now a wide serviced organization that serves the workplace in corporate offices and higher ed, healthcare, and have owned the business now 22 years. So there you go.
That is awesome, Denny. What I really love about this is, 2 things really stand out about that is you're really all in on Indianapolis and the state of Indiana. And that means a lot to the people here and the investments that you make. And, you guys really walk the walk when it comes to that. Talk about, coming in and investing at a time where there's really economic uncertainty. That certainly shows your resilience as well. So well done. We teed up living a life that matters. What does that mean to you?
When I first heard this, I was chairing the United Way campaign for Central Indiana, and someone read this story, and I latched onto it. It's called Living a Life That Matters by Michael Josephson. But what really resonated with me was it's not about titles. It's not about power. And there are people in this world that at one time or another, they have titles and power in their life. Some of those people are respected and some of them are not so respected. But what really struck me is, what do people think about them after the fact? And I realized there are people that I respect very highly after they have left roles or maybe even passed away. And I look back, and it was because of who they were as people. And it's what they shared. And it's about the way they lived and how fair they were and how people looked upon them as an example in life. But it was not because you were the president of this bank or you're the CEO of this organization. It was about who you were, how you gave back, how you contributed. And I latched onto the story and have lived it ever since. At the end of the day, that's all that's going to matter. And I think all of us would like to leave this earth not saying, how much money did you make? How important were you? What kind of power did you yield? You'd like people to say, good person, fair, authentic, ethical, moral, and those things matter. So that's really what hit me.
I look back at my early career. There's people that were impactful in my early career that are no longer here. And, as you were talking that evening, it even spurred further thought to me is this spills over more than just in our professional lives and our personal lives and kind of our circle of trust that we have and the people that we know in our network. And I think as we all get older, that mortality starts to sink in. And I think we think about these things more and more. I know I certainly do. So thinking about these values, how are they shaping your life?
I'm a strong believer in fairness. I'm a believer in kindness, setting a great example, having great expectations of people. Our guiding principles here at RJE start with to be ethical and businesslike in everything we do. And it is to take that high road and live that way and put your best foot forward. Whether you win a job, lose a job, get in a difficult situation or not, you take the high road, and it's how you conduct yourself to be professional, businesslike, and ethical. I'm a big one on fairness. I think everyone needs to understand there's always 2 sides to every story. And if you ever reflect on that, there's always 2 sides to every story. And I think people should be given the benefit of the doubt, and people should be listened to. And that's really kind of how it's resonated in our business, that I want everyone to be able to say, by working at RJE, you're dealt with fairly. It's an ethical business. There's no vindictiveness. Yes, we're human beings, but people are dealt with correctly and professionally along the way. I think our brand has really developed in that way, and people do look at us that way because that's the way the people conduct themselves. When I hire someone, the first criteria I say is you must be a good person. And by being a good person, I mean good ethics, good morals, good values. You understand the meaning of commitment, obligation. I need you to have skills. but I want you to be that good person first. So that kind of tells you how we kind of lived this and driven it into our business and our lives here.
So that was a great answer, because you really answered the next question that I had, was how do these values show up every day in RJE? And there's clear intentionality. I mean, just from what you're talking about in terms of the values that you're driving and how you're operating, and not only internally, but external with your clients. I want to shift gears a little bit in terms of talking about the polarizing times that we're in today. And much of that's driven through social media and news, who all too often really have an agenda. But I firmly believe, I think as you do, that there's a lot more that unites us than divides us. But we don't always get to see that because of how content is constantly blasted out at us. And clicks and impressions, in many cases, are more valued than civility or even being accurate. It's more like be the first to get things out there. So how do you feel that we get to more as a society of living a life that matters and being generous and being kind rather than attacking and suppressing opposing opinions?
It's a world we live in that perplexes many of us, but I think there's a few things that go with this. Number one, I think people need to be informed, and I think they need to make the effort to be informed. And I think they need to educate themselves as to truth, because there's truth out there in the world, but all too often, as you alluded to, we stop at something we hear on the media, or we stop at the headline and we don't read down into it. But I think the more people inform themselves and educate themselves, they'll understand what their truth is and what's the truth in the matter. But there's another element here would make us a better world if everyone took the time to understand the other person's value system. We all come from different places, and we come with different backgrounds. We had a sociologist come in years ago and meet with our leadership team. And he said, do you all realize that you all individually think you are the norm, that you are the average? Everyone should see the world the way you see it, because that's the way you see it. You can't understand how anyone could see anything any different. And I've never forgotten that, because many in this world we do. We're like, why could that person ever think that? Well, when you pause and take the time to understand, where's that person come from? What has made them where they're at? Why do they see the world the way they do? When you understand that more and you're informed and you're educated, gosh, it allows you to be more open and more understanding. And when people do understand each other, it doesn't mean that you have to agree with that moment or that event or that opinion, but it helps you understand it, accept it more, and have a more civil discussion around it. And so those are the points. I would say be informed, be educated, and understand that other person's value system.
I think social media and the environment we live in has caused at times for a lack of curiosity. And you always think about, like, be curious, not judgmental. And I think you hit upon a really important point, was take the time to understand somebody else's position, where they're at in life, what their life experiences have brought them. And I think for as many great things as social media has done, I think at times it's created a lot of bad habits where we want to be quick to respond, but not so quick to really understand and to be curious. And that's where a common ground is missed. And I just thought that this subject, I think, fits in so much in terms of what that living a life that matters really does, and how we have the ability every single day to make an impact, and hopefully a positive impact on everybody's lives. We teased at the beginning of this the 10 things that require zero talent. And I know a lot of the listeners have seen various renditions of this, but these are never going to not stand the test of time or to go out of fashion. And they're very simple, they're very impactful, and they're very powerful. Why do you feel that these tend to get lost so easily in society today?
When you read these, and it talks about things like being on time, making effort, having energy, having passion, having a positive attitude. When you think of those kinds of things, those were just 4 or 5. They don't take effort, but a lot of people today, Steve, I think, like to make excuses for why something can't be done or isn't done or wasn't done right. And I told you I was raised in a family of 7 children. But my mother always used to say, when us kids would come to her and she'd want us to do a chore, and I would say, Mom, I can't do that. I can't do that because, she would say, can't never could do anything. And I always hated that answer because she was right, but as a kid, I didn't like it. But think of the truth in that: can't never could do anything. But we live in a world where a lot of people want to make excuses of why they cannot do something or won't do something, or why something good doesn't happen to them. But if you look at it, all these things that do not cost a single dime of anyone, and if you drive that into your world, you realize you can impact your life. We have a saying here at RJE that you determine your future. And I think the 10 things that require zero talent, those are things that directly impact you determining your future. And hopefully people can dig deep down into that. You know, a lot of times people don't execute against that. They give up. And I'm going to give credit to my son, who called me one day and he said, "Dad, I've got a really good one for you." He goes, "I just left somewhere and the keynote speaker said, strategy is for amateurs, execution is for professionals." And I said, that is a good one. Think of all the times that people talk about getting things done. I want to do this, or here's our master plan, but they don't execute. Well, if you don't execute a plan, or you don't execute against your life, things won't happen for you. And so it is about how you execute in this life.
Yeah, it's just amazing. Out of those 10 things, I've seen so many different lists, but the things that you brought on, like being on time, work ethic, effort, body language, energy, attitude, passion, you know, all of those things, they're so simple, yet so effective. You know, one of my pet peeves is always, don't be the person that walks in late carrying a cup of Starbucks, you know, those types of things. So, but they're impactful and they can lead you a long way in life. This is also on your website, so I know that it really resonates through the rest of your organization, but your favorite mantra is, do what we say we will do. And this makes absolutely perfect sense. Why do you think so many businesses fail to execute this?
I think a lot of times it's example that's not shown. It's not demanded in your organization. And when it's not demanded and it doesn't become part of who you are, no one executes against that. Those are those components of making sure that people will perform at a high level.
Well, there's absolutely no doubt from what you speak to that common bond throughout your organization has led to incredible growth, delivering incredible value to your clients, and certainly leads to excellent client retention. But I know that your team over there executes that way, and I know that it starts at the top with you. I'm going to go back to what we teased at the beginning, and we talked about the single word that is the secret to all success. So I want to go back to that night in April with the dining experience for the ISU students, and you asked everybody at the beginning of that, through the night, I'd like for you to collectively, as a group, talk about that. And then we will go around each table at the end of the night and everybody talk about their answer. And I know on our end, our conversation was extremely robust in a lot of different directions, but I don't think that any of the tables actually got the question right, although there were some fantastic answers that were delivered that gave everybody, a moment to pause, like, yeah, that's a great idea. But I'm going to turn it over to you and let you put a bow on this and share with the group.
In my 12 years of supporting and sponsoring that event at Indiana State, there's only been one table that got the word. That single word that is the secret to all success is a word we've talked about quite a bit here. And that single word that is the secret to all success is generosity. And when you stop and think about it, the things that make you successful, that get you recognized, that give you that living a life that matters, centers around how you give back, not just financially, but how do you give back in your time and your resource and your skills and your capabilities? And I have a theory on that. And the theory is this. Number one, I think there is always a little bit divine intervention, and God wants to help those people that do good on this earth. And the second one is, I find most businesses and organizations, communities and individuals, they like to be around like-minded people, people that give back, people that have values like they do, people that live that kind of life, and they want to reward it, and they want their people to do business with people like that and associate with people like that. So when you think about it, it's generosity. And if you go to any institution or individual that you really admire, I'll bet you that common thread is they're a very generous organization that gives it back into the community, but it's also leaders that give back to their people that allows them to go out into the community. So that single word that's secret all success, generosity.
It was awesome. And to see everybody's reaction to that. I know everybody walked away that evening with just great feelings and learned a lot. And I tell you that because I've connected with probably close to a dozen of the students that since that night that have reached out to me, or I've reached out to them to talk about that. And this really goes to my favorite part of what Michael Josephson wrote, which really ties into the generosity that you just talked about. And I'll read this as we close out. What will matter is not what you bought, but what you built, not what you got, but what you gave. What will matter is not your success, but your significance. What will matter is about what you learned as well as what you taught. What will matter is every act of integrity, compassion, courage, or sacrifice that enriched, empowered, or encouraged others to emulate your example. What will matter is not your competence, but your character. So as we close, Denny, I want to thank you one more time, not only for your partnership, but for all you do in Central Indiana. You're a true leader in this community and around the state, and the investments that you make and the work that RJE does around the Indianapolis area and across the state impacts people's lives daily. And so we're proud to be a partner with you. Love what you bring to the table in terms of leadership. So thank you again, and look forward to catching up again sometime.
Thank you for allowing me to come on.